Hey, and we're live. Awesome. Hey, you guys, Tammy Anderson Ward here from the Energy Healing Conference. What up? I'm so honored and super proud actually to have on today's guest where we get to interview him a little bit more about how he got started doing what he's doing, the type of people that he serves. And I mean, some of you who follow me on Facebook, you may have already kind of heard me um, kind of leaning in towards how excited I am about this very special guest. He's going to be speaking at the upcoming summer conference that is happening June 13th and 14th in Layton, Utah at the Davis Conference Center. And I'm just so thrilled to have him be a part of this. One of the things, if you know me, I'm really passionate about bringing all different types of healing to the forefront. And sometimes things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. And, contrary to popular belief, I am not anti-doctor, right? If I'm hurt or if something's going on, like I am the first to say, let's figure this out. I'm not going to be someone who beats around the bush on that kind of stuff. I want to be able to provide solutions and answers, and I'm not the person to do it. I don't have the medical degree. I don't have that background, right? I stay in my lane, if you know what I mean. One of the things I am really good at, however, is being a bridge and helping people to get connected to some possible resources. And after doing a brief speaker interview with today's guest, I just knew how important it is to have him be on board. He is going to be somebody that you're going to want to listen to, especially if you or someone that you know in your life is looking for a solution that is not just somebody who understands energetics, right? The energy anatomy, but also is willing to look at somebody from a full perspective, right? Somebody who has medical training and who also has empathy and understanding. Today's guest, if you haven't guessed it yet, is Dr. Brett J. Earl, and he is from the Denali Specialty Clinic that is based in Bountiful, Utah. And today I'm going to go ahead and bring him on without further ado. Now, if you have any sort of questions, please feel free to go into the comments, whether you're on the live or the replay, but we will be on live today. All right, let's go ahead and bring him on. How are you?
I'm doing great. Wow. Thank you for that intro. I'm humbled to be here and grateful. So thank you for your time as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one of the things I hear from people is that they go to their doctor, their regular doctor, and they don't get any sort of compassion. They just kind of get pushed through and run through like numbers, never really getting to the root of what's going on with them, even sometimes being told that it's in their head. And so after interviewing you the other day, I honestly just want to say thank you for being somebody who takes time to hear what people are experiencing and then also being invested in their overall health. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. That's very humbling. It's a unique experience for me as well to be able to serve people and to really bring together the pieces that frankly aren't really seen in the medical world. So again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I want to hear more about what has really inspired your journey into medicine, and then maybe a little bit about how your approach does different from how is it different, from a conventional medical practice?
Wow. Bit of a story, if you will. Obviously, I'm going to hit the high points. The big issue is I got sick myself. I went to medical school and did my residency in emergency medicine. What an opportunity, because I got to see everything from strokes and brain bleeds and the geriatric patients and all of the complications. Before patients went to the ICU, the intensive care unit, they came through me. So I got to see the sickest of the sick. I got to see all of the trauma. And then everything in between. People think that, people go to the hospital when they really need to. And sometimes that happens, but we got to see people who were just concerned because they weren't sure what this cold was doing to them and how it was going to impact their life. And so just a unique experience. Obstetrics, pediatrics, you name it, it came through the emergency department. And it just gave me this broad perspective that that really encompassed a lot of medicine. And I, like you, I was somewhat, I mean, I knew I was making a difference in the patient right then, but then I sent them off to see their family practice doctor or the internal medicine or the specialist or what have you, or we would admit them to the hospital. Often I would see those patients come back again and again and again without a resolution of their symptoms or their situation. And that was very frustrating. I got into medicine because I wanted to help people. I wanted to see their lives improve. And that bridge just wasn't being met. So, but at the same time, I had a family, needed the job, and I can't blame, the medical doctors. I was there. You are under everything from corporate standpoint, payments, making sure that your turnover is sufficient, that you're profitable. I mean, it just is on and on and on, the pressure that mounts. And so a lot of times you see your doctor and they have this time crunch. You've got 10 minutes you've got 15 minutes with them, and whatever they can figure out in 15 minutes is what they're able to deliver. Mm-hmm. And then I think when they offer things that don't quite give the answers, I mean, the big phrase that I always hear with the pharmaceuticals is that your disease can be managed. That's frustrating to me. And it was then, but I didn't have any solutions. Well, I would say God, the universe, had a little different plan for me. And I grew up on a farm. We purchased some farm ground, and on that farm were some old barns. And in one of those old barns was a pretty decent growth of black mold. And I was in there throwing, everything from weights to hay and everything around, moving that around. And I was in that barn for about 9 months. And I played college baseball. I was an avid weightlifter, and I went from being able to lift 300 pounds, bench press 300 pounds, which is a lot. I was in good shape. And in 9 months, I could barely get 125 pounds off my chest, and just really started deteriorating quickly. I was a doctor myself. It wasn't making sense. And I tried to just push through. That didn't work. So I started seeing the specialist, cardiologist. It's not your heart, your heart's fine, pulmonologist. And they could detect there were things going on with my lungs, but my x-ray was normal. My CAT scan was normal. All these tests were normal. I saw a neurologist. I saw the infectious disease doctor. And interesting that you bring up the concept or the thought that you're often told it's in your head. That was me. I remember to this day the time when I was sitting in my basement with a prescription in order to help my mental disease that was causing all of these symptoms. And I looked at that and I had to make a decision, because I knew if I started down that path, I would be down that path. And something somewhere just said, no, don't do this. And I put the prescription down, and even though I felt miserable, I was tired, exhausted, fatigued, brain fog, and just ached from head to toe. I decided that I was going to fight and I was going to get to work. So I did what any good researcher would do, and I started attending conferences, and I did this massive dive into the research. My life depended upon it. I either did that, or I covered up my symptoms, or the other alternative, which wasn't a lot of fun. Yeah. I got so sick at one point in time. People look at me now and they think, because in fact, I recently returned from a scuba trip to Cozumel. I was able to do that. My life was so bad and my pain was so bad that I would cry, and I'm not a crier. I would cry going down a flight of stairs because of the pain. I would actually walk out my side door of my home and take the gentle slope down, even though it was immensely more distant than just the stairs. I would do that rather than take the stairs. At one point in time, my pancreas was failing, my liver had issues, my kidney had issues, I had infections inside of me, and my lungs were failing. My heart had an arrhythmia. I mean, I was sick. I kid you not, I had an 80 to 90% mortality. That means I only had a 10 to 20% chance to live. Wow. And so when patients come in and they sit in that chair with me, I see myself. I was there. I was in that chair. I had the frustration of no answers. And I felt that. It was very real for me personally. And so when I see patients come in, I feel differently about that situation. Well, in order to figure out what was going on with me, like I said, I had to get into the research. I had to get into the data and realize that a lot of the data that your medical doctor sees, it's not the whole picture. I started going to conferences that were a little outside the box and realized that there was this, I would call it almost a smorgasbord. It's just this amazing amount of information, of real data, real science that put together all of these different pieces of wellness and health. And that started my journey. I got sick. And the structure of Western medicine as it is now didn't have answers for me. And so, and I'm a big believer in the fact that certainly, we celebrate our successes, but it's our challenges, it's our obstacles, it's our difficulties that determine who we are. And that day I decided to fight. And I continued to deteriorate significantly from that day until I started to put pieces together in my own life so that I could, and I would say the driving force for me, certainly my family. I wanted to get well so that I could see grandchildren. I wanted to get well enough I could sit on the floor and play with them. But I knew I needed to offer patients something different, something real. And the data drove me there. And that's slowly over time and over the years, I've been able to put those pieces together, not just in a way that made a huge difference for me, but now is making a difference for my patients. It's the most rewarding thing ever is to sit across from a patient and them to say, "You saved my life. You changed my life." There is nothing like that that you can reproduce, I think, anywhere in the world. And it's humbling. It's very humbling to think that I've been given that opportunity, but it was an opportunity through challenge, through difficulty.
Yeah. Well, that's such an inspiring story, honestly. And I feel like it has a lot to do with courage. At the root of it for me, what you did when you made that decision to fight, as you said, that's courage right there. And I just,
and some fear, let's be honest. Oh my gosh, some fear. I mean, you use any instrument of motivation that you can, but yes, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I had this quote written on my mirror with a marker for a long time in my bedroom. It said, courage is not the absence of fear, but being brave and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. Like every single person that you help, it's like that. It's like going back to that moment when you decided to not give up. I just love that story. Thank you for being honestly, kind of vulnerable and sharing that. It just helps us to see more of like what your vision is and like your motivation, behind why you've created what you've created and how you decided to not give up and just settle for because you could have, you could have, but you didn't. There's this driving force inside of you that said, I'm not going to give up.
Well,
And
Tammy, that's kind of you to say. Very kind. Thank you.
Well, it's that moment that you decided to go for it. I can relate because I've talked to you a little bit about my diagnosis that I had a few years ago. And I was on bed rest actually for about 7 months where I really struggled just to even get up. And people were like, no, you weren't. I saw you at a conference. And I'm like, that was a ton of caffeine and a smile slapped across my face during those 7 months. And then I would just like crash so hard, but I was doing the best I could. But I remember it was like a 2 minutes. I pictured myself not doing the conferences anymore because it would have been so much easier to not continue. And I was like, no, that was like the worst 2 minutes of my life. I'm like, no, we're not quitting. We're going to keep going. And I actually got up and trained and did a half marathon, the first race I'd ever done in my life, about 2 months later. Because I just,
Wow.
so I just feel like I can relate with you on that level anyway, that one thing. But I just
Yeah.
appreciate your story so much.
Well, thank you for sharing that too. It's true. We all get those crossroads in life, and certainly we don't have to be perfect at each of those crossroads. It seems like we'll get those opportunities again if we don't make the right choice.
Yeah.
But yes, it's just you just have to fight. You just have to get up the next day and make the next day happen.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'd love to hear more. If you could go ahead and explain a little bit more about how your clinic kind of integrates traditional, like, medical knowledge, because you are a doctor, right? And then also some of the more holistic healing approaches that are out there. How does that all fit in? Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the conferences that I went to early on. So fungal testing, parasite testing, a lot of the testing is really bad. Even today, there's not great testing for fungus and parasites. And I was at a conference that was focused on cardiology. I knew my heart was okay. It later took a little bit of a turn for the worse, but I knew my heart wasn't driving this whole scenario.
Yeah.
But I went anyway, and it was not cheap, and I didn't have the time, but somehow I made the time. Long story short, on the last day, it'd be too poetic if it was the last speaker on the last day. But on the last day, this gentleman got up and he gave his lecture on cardiology and cardiology health. And it was a functional medicine conference. So there was, talk about supplementation and how you integrate that, et cetera. And he looked at the clock and he said, I have 15 minutes left. You're a captive audience. I love fungal infections. Here we go. And I sat there and he just listed off my symptoms and told me exactly what was going on, why it was hard to diagnose. And it's interesting, in my mind's eye, if you will, I saw this old barn and I saw the black mold, if you will. And interesting again enough, months later, I went back into this barn because I had started just getting a bad feeling about the barn. And I went back in and I saw the black mold now creeping up the walls. And I knew that was, part of the process. But when he started down that road, he said a couple of very important things. He said, one, pharmaceuticals won't necessarily get you better, but they'll make you feel better. And so I came home and put myself, I'm a doctor, so I was like, I'm gonna write my own script. And I put myself on an antifungal, and I felt better in 3 days than I had in years.
Wow.
And so just by the process of elimination and this lecture, I knew what I had. But I also knew then that Western medicine wasn't going to be the answer. It wasn't going to be all of the answer. Now, I used those tools, and I still do today. There are patients, in fact, I had one just a few weeks ago that came in with such an overwhelming fungal infection. It was erupting in their skin, their mucosa. And again, if we're seeing it in your skin, if we're seeing it in your nails, if we're seeing it somewhere externally, it's raging inside of the peritoneal space and in the abdomen. And so I put them on an antifungal prescriptive just to get the numbers down to where we could make a difference more quickly, if you will. And so integrating that, but then understanding that that's not the whole process. And I would say that's one of the other pieces is I see this on YouTube all the time with a lot of the talking heads and so forth. And it's, I get it. It's for clicks, but they talk about the one thing that you need and the one this and the super special and the secret hidden. And they talk about this one single item, and people go out and they buy it. And it's not that it's a bad product. It's the fact that it needs to be part of a system and part of a process.
Right.
And that's a little bit of what I do now, as well as I watch those because there's sometimes some good information there. And then I extrapolate out the data. I go back to the research and say, okay, what is actually going on? And how does this integrate into my process, my systems, so that we can get true wellness, not just a silver bullet. And that's really the big truism. If you're thinking there's a silver bullet out there. There is not. You have to come at these different infections and processes from so many different perspectives in order to get lasting success. And so that's really the crux of the practice. Most of my patients, we focus on really getting rid of the core 7 triggers of all disease. And if we focus down to that level, get that foundational, then rid that from the body, give the body what it needs, and then the miracle body will do the rest for us. And then I get to sit back and take credit. I'm kidding. We give credit where it's due, which is the miracle body. But that's the process, is figuring out what's going on. We have a series of pretty in-depth testing that we do, and find out what is at the root cause. What are those 7 triggers? And if I may, just kind of a brief, because it might be someone's first introduction to the 7 triggers. In my process of all this research, I wanted to get down to everything that was causing the disease. And your doctor, you go to your Western medicine doctor right now, and he can put 33,000 labels on you right now. Again, diagnoses. Yeah. And that system is rewarded because he gets paid based on the number of labels he puts on you. And when you leave the office and you've got this list of 20 different diagnoses, that is disheartening. You're thinking, I can never make it through this. But then if you realize, okay, all that can be boiled down to 7 core triggers that I can explain literally every disease on the planet with these core triggers. That's a life change.
Can we hear what they are? Are you okay to just talk about those briefly?
Oh man, I don't know. It's top secret, vital information. No. So the first is congenital. Congenital, it means that it's a genetic SNP or alteration of your genes. So things like Down syndrome, Turner syndrome. We hear about the MTHFR deficiencies. Something that's in your genetics that makes you prone or actually causes the disease. For example, cystic fibrosis, it actually causes that disease, if you will. And so congenital is the first. The second is nutrition, and that usually deals more with nutrition deficiencies. And 97% of Americans are deficient in nutrients. And that has to do with our food supply, which again, that's another story for another day that would be fascinating to go down. But our nutrition, by and large, doesn't have what we need in order to get well and stay well. So nutrition. The next is toxins. So that ranges everything from heavy metals. Even some of the metals we thought weren't toxic before can become toxic in big numbers. So metals, hydrocarbons, we have 83,000 chemicals that we have to deal with in today's society that we didn't deal with, say, 100 years ago. 83,000, and that number is growing exponentially every single year. So toxins. The next is infection. So there's the big 4 from an infection standpoint. So viruses, fungus, parasites, and then bacteria. And what's really interesting about those is the fact that we think about kill, 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 when in reality, our bodies are actually designed to work in unison with them. Some of the bacteria that we think cause the greatest disease, actually, if they're in the right environment, give us huge health benefits, but they have to be put in the right scenario. So it's putting life in balance rather than trying to destroy everything. And that's a big difference. Let's see, the next one is trauma. So trauma is one of those things that I got a lot of experience with in emergency medicine. And this focuses especially on physical trauma. So your broken bones, your car accidents, things that cause structural damage to your body. The next is stress. Stress comes in all kinds of different forms. So we have emotional stress, we have physical stress, we also have stress that comes from these chronic infections. The key there is not necessarily the stress per se, but how our body deals with the elevated cortisol. For example, football players, and I just throw that out, or other people, chess players for that matter, they've actually measured their cortisol levels when they're undergoing either a match or a game, and they're off the charts. I'm kidding, I'm exaggerating there, but they're very high, higher than some other patients who are experiencing different adrenal and stress symptoms. And so why do those people not have an issue with the cortisol? Why does it actually work out to their benefit? And it has to do with how the body responds to the cortisol rather than just the cortisol itself. And so again, it's
That's
stress put into the right framework. And then
right.
the last, which really, and I put it at the last because it encompasses everything, which is energy. And again, from a disease standpoint, electromagnetic fields, I mean, there's all kinds of different energy, radiation, what have you. But even to your Wi-Fi and those type of energy components can have a big impact on your health.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you. Of course, I'm the Energy Healing Conference producer. So, of course, I'm going to appreciate the fact that you also look at that too, instead of ignoring it or pretending like it doesn't actually have an effect. I appreciate that. I definitely know from experience that you can actually have, disturbances from that personally, especially those who are a little bit maybe more sensitive as well. So,
Yes.
thank you.
That's a great way to put it. More sensitive. Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people who literally they can't work at certain places because of the way that the lights are. It would trigger a migraine or not allow them to sleep or just, and they've been written off by their regular traditional doctor. So I appreciate so much the fact that you do take that into consideration. And that was a pretty substantial list there. I mean, really like very all encompassing. I appreciate that. And really to me personally, I'm not a doctor. I'm a mom. I have 8 kids, right? I don't have a farm necessarily, but I live out in the country. And I am looking at your list and I'm thinking, this is what holistic actually is. It's looking at the whole picture, not compartmentalizing different little pieces, but looking at the entire picture of that person's life. And so how cool is it that when you go to somebody like you, right? Or to you, I should say, you really are going to get somebody who's looking at everything, right? So if let's say that somebody comes into you, what is the whole like procedure? What does it look like if somebody comes into you? What's the first thing that happens?
Well, obviously you'll come in contact with us. You'll reach out to our staff and that process, if you will, gauge your interest. We have a consultation, kind of a discovery. I call it
Uh-huh.
discovery rather than diagnosis, because really we're trying to discover everything that's going on to the best that we can. What I found also when I just throw this in because it's interesting is that over the years I found that we do this comprehensive, and I can talk about that discovery process, but we do this what I feel is a comprehensive discovery process, and then find that there was something hidden that was layers down that didn't show up at first. And so it's interesting that some of the pieces that we put together at first may be hidden. But our discovery process is we have a comprehensive. Some patients look at that and say, "Oh, I've got to fill out this booklet," but I have a comprehensive intake. I find that if patients will take some time and sit down and go through a series of questions, how does this affect you? How does that affect you? What have you done in the past in order to help with your disease? That really, well, one, it makes them feel like they're heard. But two, it takes that whole process of a history. So again, you get 15 minutes with your doctor, if that. It
Yeah.
takes that whole, whatever, how long it takes you, 30 minutes, 2 hours, depending upon the patient, to fill that out. And I can then boil that down into something that's a little more concise and direct. So the intake is vital. We have the opportunity, if necessary, to do a biometric. I have a bioresonance device here that I use in order to measure energy. That's fascinating technology, but we do a bioresonance. We do labs, so blood, urine, stool. We have the opportunity to do MRIs, X-rays, all of those different components if we're thinking that this is something more structural.
Wow.
And then ultimately, there is a history and examination, and that unlocks pieces that patients didn't really notice if you'll actually, I know it's nuanced now, but actually touch the patient. And it's a big deal as far as figuring out what's going on and then putting that together with what we find on examination. In fact, sometimes I can figure out the location of, say, different pockets of infection or abnormalities or what have you, based on and it's a precise examination. We're focused in on certain areas depending upon your complaints, but actually examining the patient. And the power behind that, which is interesting, is that now I have something I can compare to. One of our big pushes right now is this gut reset. And I'll do an initial examination of the abdomen, and they'll come back in a month later, and they're like, I don't know, is it this, is it changing? And I'll push on their belly, and they're like, oh, that's not tender anymore. That's changing. I'm like, yeah, you're seeing the difference. So each of those different components plays a role in giving me a different perspective of what's going on in the center, which is you. And then ultimately, we have a discovery continuum, which is we place that on an overall picture and give you an idea of what's going on in your health.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, so I'm just curious, like, because of the work that you do, you have to be one of those more sensitive people as well. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have even have looked at the energetics of it. Do you consider yourself to be a little bit more, like, I guess you could call it intuitive or sensitive, at, maybe more than what you've seen with your colleagues?
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. Part of it's one of the conversations I have fairly frequently with some of my staff and other people other practitioners who are in this realm is, I mean, I practiced for 16 years in emergency medicine. I never missed an appendicitis. I never missed a stroke. I never missed a heart attack. Yeah. And you could say that's blind luck, but it's interesting. I knew what was, and there was a patient I remember, she 2 or 3 weeks since she had delivered her baby and just came in with these very generalized symptoms. I knew it was in her head, and we could, I mean, the CAT scan was normal. We did a CAT scan with contrast, that was normal. And I ended up getting in this argument with the lead physician on that day and then administration when I ordered a follow-up MRI. And they said, look, this is normal, that you've done your due diligence, just send her to the neurologist. And I just didn't feel right. So I was able to persevere, I will say, and we got her off to the MRI, and it found this blood clot in her cavernous sinosum and high mortality rates. And we then were able to get her to the University of Utah, and she did great. She did fabulous. But had we not, again, that has a high mortality. It's something that I don't talk about much, just simply because, again, over the years, in my line of work as an MD, you don't talk about the fact that you feel these things and sense those things. So, but yes, it's one of those things that I do feel.
Yeah, and I get the sense about you that it's not like you're walking around, all like with your head up saying, ho, ho, ho. I'm asking you just because of what I feel about you. You know what I mean? As I've gotten to know you a little bit better and hear even some of your stories, I'm like, it's really cool, I think. So I know many people who are viewing this probably right now, because we are on the Energy Healing Conference channels, they're going to be really interested in the connection between energy work and physical health. And so I'm just really curious, like, how do you view that relationship in your practice?
Well, again, everything I do has some level of science behind it. And I'll admit, I call myself a geek nerd idiot, an idiot because I study way too much, a geek because I'm fascinated by this deep science, and a nerd because I just keep pushing through. And even though everybody looks at me and says I'm crazy, I'm just like, no, this is the way it has to happen. But I with this biometric device, bioresonance device that we use, I was part of their research team, if you will, at one level. And it really became a quest for me to sort out why that worked. And it was very interesting. I wouldn't just take it at face value. I had to find out why that worked. And its principle is that it works very similar to what we use in chemistry. So let's say that we have a single element of gold and a single atom, of gold. And we want to know what that is. There's not a microscope that goes down that deep. There's not a way that we can verify it except for through energy. And what they found is that if we bounce energy off that element, off that atom, each atom has its own unique resonance or bounce. So for example, gold or silver or carbon or oxygen. And so that's the science behind it. And again, very interesting, even though Western medicine gets all excited about their EKGs, their MRIs, magnetic resonance, anyone? CAT scans, etc., where we're beaming energy into people to see what's going on inside, or hooking up EKGs to find out what their heart is doing and what's going on inside. They believe that, but they discredit everything else. I'm just, seriously? But it's just very interesting. And then down at its core, if you want to get down to the physics, the core of energy, we think we're physical beings. We push on ourselves and etc. And we meet these barriers and we think we're energy beings. But the reality is, if you get down to that same atom and say, okay, how much is solid and how much is energy? It's only 2% that they consider something solid. So we are energy beings, if you will, even all the way down to the atomic level, massive amounts of energy. And we're finding, with Tesla's work and others, Tesla was a genius. Energy, resonance, vibration, frequency, those pieces that he just emphasized again and again, they impact every part of our body.
That's really cool. Well, and I appreciate how you're bringing it into play, because I look at it from all these different perspectives. A few years ago, I had something happen in my life, my own personal life, that made me pull back from energy healing completely. And I was like, I'm doing these conferences, but I'm not doing these conferences if it's not legit. And so luckily I was already aligned with the NCC OEP. That is a nonprofit organization that is full of people who have a lot of PhDs. They're all of like these really cool older hippies, that have all these letters behind their last name. And I'm like, you guys, can you like show me? And they were like, oh yeah, we got you, girl. Let us show you, So I was reminded at a root level, again, what energy healing actually is. And I love how you bring it back in, so that even people who are very skeptical, or they just look at everything from a very academia, like it's okay. Like, it's okay. You don't have to understand it the same way that other people just feel it, but you can know it by actually looking at the emerging, research. So I just appreciate that so much. I'd really love to kind of transition now. If you're okay, I'd love to hear some of the most transformative stories that you've had with patients. You are a doctor who's working with patients in your clinic. I know you have seen some successes. I'd love to hear kind of what you've witnessed at your clinic there.
Yeah, it's been, again, a lot of fun. I would say a few cases come to mind. I mean, mine, obviously, that one's one that just, every day excites me. The other day I was out working in the yard and I just thought, oh, I could not do this. Or we had a birthday party for my little 3-year-old granddaughter, and I got right down on the floor and then just bounced right back. I was like thinking, man, a few years ago even, I wouldn't have been able to do that because of how sick I was. We had a patient who, and she actually has a YouTube video on our YouTube video on our channel. Make sure I get the verbiage right. And her name is Allie Bell, and she was basically bedridden. She would sleep in as much as she could because she was sleeping so poorly. She would get up and get a few things to eat. She was kind of the caregiver. She was the caregiver for an autistic son, and she just could barely do the basics. And she was because of this, her marriage was frayed. It was fracturing, actually. And she started looking for something that would help her feel better. She initially started with our IVs. And I just want to throw this interjection in here. I believe very much in the combination of something chemical, something mechanical, and something energetic. That triangle is really exponential in delivering care. Some people will respond more to the energy work. Some people will respond more to the chemistry. And we do we've really hit the chemistry hard in medicine. But some people need that mechanical piece. And if you combine those, people get better results. And she started with a piece of our clinic that was heavy in the chemistry, which is, it was our IV work. And it started her down the process of regaining that energy so that she could reclaim her life. She then said she was in for an IV. She was complaining about a pain that she had in her upper hamstring that had been there since high school from a high school injury. And I said, well, our Renuo 2 helps that. Again, something mechanical that happened to her. And we did some injections into that area. And within a short period of time, that resolved. She had a bad back. We did injections in her back. That resolved. And so she started, and I put some energy healing into the injections, which is very unique for us. It's one of the unique processes that we do. So we did her injections. The next thing that she gravitated to was our breast health. We have a process where we use a precision, anatomically correct way to cleanse the breast, restore its natural health, rejuvenation, lift, fullness. And that went well. So then she was in, and she said, okay, what else do you do? And at that time, we were launching our gut reset. And so she jumped into that. It took her a little bit because she had been sick for so long. But next thing she was saying, okay, my brain fog is better, and I have energy, and I have, all these other components. And then ultimately, just more recently, she hadn't mentioned this much before, or we at least hadn't focused on that, but she had a diagnosis of interstitial cystitis. So this is a neurologic inflammation component, if you will, in the pelvis that makes you feel like you can't get away from the bathroom for very long. And in fact, she was 20 minutes was about her limit. And she said then she would rush to the bathroom, feel like she had to go urgently, that she was going to have an accident if she didn't. And there was not much there. And so her entire pelvis was inflamed. So we started her down our process of a pelvic reset. Again, if you watch the video, you'll see, but she's finished up a book. No, I'm sorry. She had a book out that she polished off. She wrote a second book. She's now writing yet another book. She is running a multi-million-dollar social media company. She and her husband, they say, they talk about the fact that they are closer than ever and more revitalized than ever. And she looks amazing. We have patients that come in when she walks in and out. They're like, she has a glow, and she does. And it's just, it's amazing. It's gratifying. It's humbling to be a part of that. And just to see her come in and just light up when she comes into clinic, because she knows this is a place where we were able to help her change her life.
That is so
probably one of the most powerful stories that I've had.
That's awesome. Any others that you'd like to share today as well? Because I'm sure that people who are viewing this, they either themselves or someone that they know and love could be like a prime candidate, somebody who could really be, benefited from your services there. So.
Yeah, gosh, Tammy, again, I appreciate you letting me on, because it's really about that. It's about making people better. So we've had patients one of our main products, one that started it, is our Renuo 2. That's our injection process. Anything that moves, joints, muscles, tissues, tendon, ligaments, anything perispinal, we can put this injection into precision locations, and it basically gets the DNA active and kickstarts the natural healing process. So we've had patients that have had such bad knee pain they couldn't walk. That recovers. We had a gentleman recently who his wife brought him in. He basically said, "I'm here only because she said I had to be. I don't believe in any of this." And I said, "Well, I'm a medical doctor, and I'm going to give you a medical treatment. So let's go with that." And again, that's where I needed to focus with him. He went from basically us putting and pouring him into a wheelchair and taking him out to and from his car, to walking in without a cane, without any, any discomfort whatsoever. That's been a fun case. We've had patients with debilitating neck pain, shoulder pain, what have you, that have resolved. Sports related story. I had a young man who had torn the labrum in his shoulder, and he got an MRI that showed that it was torn. 12 weeks later, he was back pitching. He was a pitcher, and they repeated his MRI because they couldn't believe he was pitching. And the radiologist actually yelled at the tech and said, "You gave me the wrong X-ray." And she's like, "No, I didn't," because he couldn't tell that there was a previous injury.
Wow. That's so cool. I love hearing stories like this. This is really exciting.
Yeah, and we're having great success with pelvic reset. Some of those stories are a little
What is that? What's
difficult to share on but patients. I have a couple right now. They weren't able to be intimate for years, decades actually, and we were 3 or 4 treatments in, and she said, "I'm feeling great." And I said, "Well, it's time." And so she went home, and I actually saw her husband in our IV room. They are great patients. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, he was like, "You're the greatest doctor ever." I said, "Oh, thank you." But he said, "No, you saved all this stress from our marriage. And that just from reestablishing health in the pelvis. It's humbling. It's gratifying to be a part of this whole process. Frankly, as I put it, that God put together and we're trying to figure out. And I think we have some fun pieces here.
Well, this is really cool. I'm loving hearing the stories, because what it comes down to really ultimately is, each individual person. I know you're helping a lot of people, but I can tell that you're the type of doctor that, yes, you help a lot of people, but your focus is the person that's in front of you and their overall life quality, the quality of life. You know what I mean? Like what they're experiencing, and how deeply meaningful to have someone actually hear you. And I'm not trying to flatter you. I genuinely am just so grateful that someone like you is like there, and I appreciate it deeply, like really. So when somebody comes in, let's say that they do have a list of diagnoses that they've gotten from previous, experts, right? That they have been getting help and care from. Like, what kind of hope, what kind of support, like, how do you look at their overall wellness, like beyond some of the diagnoses or the others, maybe medical tests that they've had?
The interesting thing is often those diagnoses, because I was in that world, give me a clues as to what is driving those 7 triggers. So it can be very helpful. But I would say the biggest difference is knitting them all together. I just had a patient in earlier this week, back pain. In fact, his entire spine was just riddled with pain and brain fog, anxiety. And he said, "I'm not an anxious person. Why can I not control my anxiety?" And he had all these different aches and pains and other things going on. His history for his gut just lit up all kinds of red flags. And then being able to say, okay, here's the 7 triggers, here are the core, here are the triggers that you tick off, and you're checking off, if you will. And now here's what we're going to do about it. We are still a little bit moving into some of these realms. Our focus right now really is gut health, the injections, our IV room, the pelvic health, the breast health. But we have experience with cardiovascular disease. That program is coming. Neurologic disease. We've done amazing things with everything from Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, etc.
Wow.
We're just not there yet. So and when I say there, because you asked a very pivotal question, what's the process? There's a few things. One, I realize I'm not going to be able to do this all myself. Yeah. So being able to train other practitioners, and that's it in the future, it's likely that you'll see other practitioners, but being able to train them to actually trust that intuition, their instincts, and not just rely on the data and the numbers. being able to boil that down to those 7 triggers, that empowers us as practitioners as well.
Yeah.
And then the other piece, certainly we have the knowledge to do some of these other programs, but I believe an educated patient is a motivated patient. And then they need a checklist, a process, a journey. And that's what we have developed out with the gut reset and some of our other programs, so that patients aren't just showing up to their next appointment and saying, where am I and what's going on? It's like, you're here on your checklist. You're here on your journey. And that's important to me. I back to the energy, right? Mindset. If I can say, this is our plan, our progress, our purpose, if you will, and they're able to buy into that, that is a game changer. 40 to 60% of healing has been attributed to the placebo effect, if you will. And we say placebo, but really we know that's here. That's that effect. And I want to engage that. I want to make that happen. I want that 40 to 60% on my side. And that is a program, a path, a process that they can buy into and gets them results.
That's awesome. A friend just commented, she said, please train a lot of people because it's really hard to find someone with these kind of skills. And really, I will say the skill that I see is the willingness to think outside the box. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And really like use the skills that you've already learned to really be there. And it's huge. If you're watching this right now, I want to encourage you to share this video with someone that you think could really benefit from this information. Maybe feel free to even, give us some thumbs up. What it does is it increases the algorithm so more people see it. Like, yeah, there you go. Shemri says, I've been looking for a doctor like you, excited to connect. Yeah, he's freaking cool. Shemri, you're going to love this.
Humbling. Thank you.
She said, yes, I'm applauding you. This is a big deal. Thank you so much. So this is the information that you guys are looking for. This is how you connect with him. Reach out to his patient coordinator, Cindy. This is her phone number. You can call or text her, and you can also email her if you prefer. And then they'll go ahead and walk you through the process. I've heard that it's very simple and easy. So I highly recommend that. Okay, the next question that I have for you, and we're almost out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of skip over a few here, but want to reach out about these for sure. How do you collaborate with other healing modalities or practitioners to create comprehensive treatment plans?
Great point, and great question. I can't do everything. That's just the reality. I grew up with a good chiropractor. I believe in a good chiropractor. That's the mechanical piece. The challenge there is when they think that mechanical piece can solve everything, or they're not putting all of the energy pieces, because some chiros will use some energy, PEMF or microcurrent or what have you. And certain people respond to that and don't. And so understanding that that's the case is key. And so sometimes muscles need to be turned on. That's, again, a different chiropractic situation. I have a fantastic bioidentical not bioidentical, but biological dentist who does outstanding work just here locally. And there are other dentists here along the Wasatch Front that we connect with. There are certain pieces that, yes, I can't connect with. And I would say, ultimately, I still rely on the patient's family practice doctor. I rely on their OB. I rely on their neurologist. I rely on their cardiologist. That doesn't scare me. One of our patients that's had a lot of heart issues, he goes back to his cardiologist, and his cardiologist, I don't know how you're doing this, but you're getting better. This is unheard of. That's reassuring to me. It means I'm on the right path and right program.
That's amazing. I love it. What kind of research that have you personally found that is, I would call it emerging research, that's in foundational medicine that you're most excited about, and how is that influencing your practice now?
This is such a broad topic, and I will just say this. I was introduced to pulse electromagnetic field therapy quite a few years ago, but its implications across healing are amazing, and that's pure energy. I use microcurrent in my current practice to a fair degree to reconnect the body in new and unique ways. I will say this, and you're in the right place, Tammy, because energy and energy medicine and energy healing is going to explode over the next little bit. It is going to become massive because it's the piece, that trio, if you will, something chemical, and we're killing the chemical piece, if you will. There's still lots to learn, but mechanical, we're pretty decent at that. Physical therapy, chiropractic, all those different components. But energy work, we are in its infancy. And being able to figure out how to stack that energy work together. One of my passions right now isn't just saying, okay, this is energy work. I want to know why it works, where it works, and how I combine it with something else that makes a synergy, because that synergy unlocks exponential healing. How do I maximize the energy with this type of mechanical, not that type of mechanical, and unlock that power? That synergy is what's super exciting to me. And it's being able to put all of those pieces together that really excites me.
I'm like freaking out, actually, like freaking out excited because I want to tell you about all of these places where I personally geek out on all of the research. I'm like, ooh, I bet he knows about this. Ooh, I'm like wanting to take notes the whole time, like
That's
I'm
fine.
typing up some notes here. But have you ever been to the? It's called ASEP. Have you ever been to their conference?
I've been to a lot. I don't recall that one off the top of my head, but
They're great. I'll send you some information about those. I just decided last night that I'm going to be going to their conference, even though it's right before mine. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so soon, but I'm like, I have to go. Dr. Lori Hops, she's a scientist. She just spoke on our YouTube channel. I think it was a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I think you'd really like connect with a lot of the doctors that are involved with that as well. So we'll get you connected even more. Like I just geek out on this so hardcore too. I just love it so much. So T Sue says, what kind of options do you have for people who are out of state?
we're working on a better telemedicine program. Again, part of that, and part of my, I don't know, I'm not OCD, but I'm really into the details, if you will. Once again, the educated patient makes all the difference. And we're working on the process of being able to do much of what we do here. Obviously, you can't come into the clinic, or some patients do. I mean, I've had patients travel in from Atlanta, Florida, Seattle. Actually had some patients come down from Canada. We've had a few Chinese patients in, but they could only stay for a brief period of time. So, but we're working on being able to make that a little better. We can still do some telemedicine and focus on, again, that gut reset, get you into that program in order to maximize that, allow you to, I have connections that we're, again, putting together in a more concise way. So again, not quite yet, but where you can get products that you can use at home. One of my patients who had Lou Gehrig's disease, he was in North Carolina, and we actually created an entire clinic in his home, trained his wife how to deliver all of the care. Again, this isn't something I'm able to do currently because of some different situations, but he was given 2 months to live, and a year and a half later, his doctor said, "I've been meaning to tell you this for a long time, but you no longer have Lou Gehrig's disease." Now, he still had some of the mechanical breakdown and a whole process and story behind that situation, but it's a piece that I know is critical, and we're moving towards that as fast as we can.
That's so cool. I love this. So everybody go ahead and connect with Cindy. Her information, I'm going to go ahead and put it up one more time. I'm going to finish this off with just one more question. Just curious, what would be your best tip or your best advice for someone who maybe has had like chronic illness or something that has just really been affecting their health? What would be like the best tip that you would have for them in making a step closer to their, optimal health?
Well, if you're anything like me, if you're anything like me, it came down to that mindset to fight and not stop. Not listen to the naysayers, not listen to all the negativity, and just keep going. The fact that you're listening to this tells you that there is something out there, something more options, more opportunities, and you just have to keep fighting. Consistency, persistence, those key pieces, and keep looking. But more importantly, keep reaching out. I think the biggest mistake that anyone can make is to pull back and get into a shell and feel like, oh, there are no answers, there are no pieces that will help me. Certainly, I got to that point where I had the medication in my hands and felt maybe this is the answer, this is the only way to go. Yeah. That's the biggest piece. It really is. That if someone tells you no, you just say, you know what, I believe, I know if I fight, there's going to be something out there for me. And the fight is half of the win. It really is. The decision to fight puts you on the winner's circle.
Wow, that's really powerful. I just want to say thank you again for your time today. I know that you have such a busy, schedule that you participate in, you and your staff. Huge thanks to you. We can't wait to have you as part of the conference coming up. And you reminded me just of one of my favorite sayings, which is hope is medicine for the soul. So if you don't
Amen
give up,
to that. Yes.
if you keep going, it's pretty powerful, actually. So thank you so much. Any last thoughts?
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
So much. Oh, any last comments or any last closing thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, this is actually a quote that that we both enjoy, which is when you know better, you do better so that you can be better. And that first piece, once you know something and learn something, is make a decision to learn a little more. Even if it's just, I'm gonna click one thing and I'm gonna learn something more. Once you feel like there's something else out there that you can know and do so that you can be better, take advantage. Take that first step. Like I said, even if it's a simple click, it's an email to someone else. Again, it doesn't have to be through us. It doesn't. I just want people to get better and to inspire them to move forward in a powerful way.
That's pretty inspiring. So awesome. All right. Well, we'll see you at the conference coming up June 13th and 14th. It's actually Father's Day weekend. It's a Friday, Saturday happening in Layton, Utah at the Davis Conference Center. And thank you huge for your support. We'll see you there. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.